I want to start off by saying that fish is one of the healthiest foods you can eat in theory. They are a great source of omega-3s, and countries with very long lifespans like Japan consume large amounts of fish all the time. However, the fish that the majority of you, the viewers, are consuming right now is by far one of the most toxic and dangerous foods you can consume on a regular basis. See, the large majority of fish that we consume nowadays is farmed fish. In 2009, it was reported that half of the fish consumed globally was raised in fish farms. This number is expected to reach 2/3 of the population by 2030. The reason why you should not eat fish is because of what happens in these fish farms. For example, let's take a look at one of the most popular fishes consumed nowadays: salmon. Over 70% of salmon is raised in fish farms, Norway being one of the largest producers. A well-known environmental activist, Kurt Odekalv, investigated some of these Norwegian fish farms. He discovered that the salmon on these farms were packed very tightly, each farm holding up to 2 million salmon. And because the population was so high, disease ran rampant amongst the fish. Diseases like sea lice and ISA, infectious salmon anemia virus, were extremely common, which forced the fish farmers to use large amounts of pesticides and antibiotics to protect their stock. Pesticides are okay when you use them on plants and fruits because you can always wash a large majority of them off or peel the skin, but when you spray thousands of gallons of it into the water for your fish, it gets into the fish meat. Some of you might be thinking, well, the fishes probably excrete a large amount of it, right? Well, the thing about toxins like pesticides and antibiotics is that they tend to cling onto fat. The fish that is raised on fish farms are significantly fatter than fish found in the wild. Wild salmon contains about 5 to 7% of fat. Farm salmon contains anywhere from 15 to 34% fat. This means that a significantly larger percentage of those pesticides accumulates in these fish. Now, some of you might be thinking, well, surely there must be regulations on these pesticides and antibiotics that these fish farms use. Well, to some extent there is. However, there is one source of toxins that is completely unregulated: the fish feed, the food that they feed the fish. See, the large majority of fish feed in Europe is made of tiny fatty fish such as eels found in the Baltic Sea. Farmers like to use fatty fish for their fish pellets because they can grow their fish at an incredible speed. The problem with this is that the waters of the Baltic Sea are considered to be extremely contaminated. Factories dump large amounts of industrial waste into the Baltic every single day. It's so bad that countries surrounding the Baltic Sea, like Sweden, even warn their citizens about the potential toxicity of these fish. And although all of this fish is not fit for human consumption, there are no regulations against them using them to feed their fish. So when you take hundreds of thousands of tiny fatty eels who live in contaminated waters and you ground them up into fish feed, and then you feed this fish feed to your salmon and your carp and your tuna, the toxins get passed on to the fish that eat them. You might be thinking, well, this is far-fetched. How bad could it be? Well, a toxicology researcher named Jerome Rosen decided to test the amount of toxins found in farmed fish. He found that farmed salmon had by far the most amount of toxins in their meat than any other food group. It had 5 times the amount of toxins than the next most contaminated food, which was burger meat. 5 times. Now, what are the effects of these toxins on our bodies? Well, there have been studies on mice in which they fed the test group farm salmon and the control group wild salmon. The mice that ate farm salmon grew obese, developed layers of fat around their internal organs, and even developed diabetes. One can only wonder what the effects of these toxins would have on human beings. So what can I do about this? Should I just avoid fish completely for the rest of my life? Well, as it stands right now, you definitely should avoid farmed fish, which is basically the majority of fish that you find at your local supermarket. Any fish that is frozen and the fish that you're served in most affordable sushi places. The cheaper the fish, the more likely it comes from a fish farm. Honestly, you only really have 2 options if you want to stay healthy. The first is to somehow find wild caught fish, and the second is to avoid eating fish completely.